New today, the latest job numbers show about 130,000 more Americans are working. And while this is good news, it's lower than expected. We're talking about jobs, a San Diego home building slump, and the cost of possibly violating children's privacy. Here for the Friday Business Report is marketing strategist Miro Kopik with SDSU and Bottom Line Marketing. Good to see you.
Thanks, Ebony. Good to see you.
So jumping right in, talking about jobs, specifically manufacturing jobs, there's some new data out just this week that has some people concerned. What does it tell us?
It tells us that the manufacturing index dropped below 50 to 49.1. Below 50 suggests a shrinking economy. And the manufacturing sector has really struggled in the last year with the Chinese trade tariffs and a whole host of other factors. Hiring has just completely stopped in the sector. And what's kind of scary if you really look back at it, and people talk a lot about manufacturing, but manufacturing is only 8% of our total employment in the United States and only 11% of our GDP. In fact, what's kind of scary is that since the Great Recession, the manufacturing sector has not bounced back. From 2009 to 2017 at the beginning, we kind of regrouped and regained 1 million jobs, and since then about 500,000 jobs to date. Manufacturers are concerned about recession, about consumers who have been spending like drunken sailors, but at the same time, when they have to spend a lot more on goods that now have a 15% tariff on it, they're concerned that the orders are just not going to be there. So manufacturers are challenged, and we'll see how that continues to go. At least services had a good month last month.
And of course, you're talking about the trade war, the ongoing trade war.
Correct.
So next up, also down, new home construction here in San Diego, and in fact, it's down across the state of California, but especially here in San Diego. What does that tell us?
Well, you know, sometimes these numbers are a little bit erratic because total construction dropped 43% for the first half of 2019, which sounds like a lot, but most of it is multifamily housing, so apartments, condos, things like that. And if builders do not file a permit in a certain quarter, their units don't get counted. In the next quarter, almost 600 new units will be filed, so that number might change. The real issue is houses. Housing, single-family homes declined 26%. The biggest reason for that in San Diego is the lack of space. There's no more big areas to develop, so developments are much smaller. Housing, construction material costs are up, labor costs are up, and it's hard to afford a new house. And that's why the state, the rent control measure that's going through the assembly right now, and Gavin Newsom kind of approved last week, would kind of cap rent increases to 7%, 5% cap plus inflation, and that could be a way to control those prices and make it more affordable to live in San Diego.
So we'll be watching that very closely.
Yep.
Next up, Google and the Federal Trade Commission have reached a settlement in a case involving kids. YouTube, which is owned by Google, is accused of collecting data from videos that would be targeting kids. So what's the significance of this settlement?
Well, it's a major issue because there's an act called the Child Online Privacy Protection Act that was passed in 2000. It's been in place for 20 years. That really protects children under 13. They have to have the consent of a parent to be marketed to. Google has been working on trying to build their behavioral business. Marketers really love to understand how consumers behave, not necessarily their attitudes, so they're willing to pay a premium. And Google did this for companies like Mattel, who sells toys to younger kids, and they were slapped by a fine of $170 million. It's a big fine in relation to the COPA Act, but in the greater scheme of things, Google has been fined well over $10 billion in the last 15 months between the European Union and the United States. Facebook last month was fined $5 billion. So there's a lot of pressure on Capitol Hill to look at regulating these social media platforms the same way they regulated traditional media, television, radio in the past. And so Google, for a company that's known as their motto is do no evil, it calls into question how they're behaving in the marketplace.
Well, that wraps it up for this week's Friday Business Report. Miro Kopik, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Ebony.